Okay, if everybody's here that needs to be here?
Looks like it.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to introduce the folks sitting up here at the table so that you know who we are and why we're here. I'm on my right is Representative Ed Butler, and he is currently the clerk of the county delegation. To my left is Representative Mark McConkey, and he is the vice chairman of the delegation. And I am Representative Karen Umberger, and I am the chairman of the delegation. In accordance with the rules of the Personnel Committee, the three of us sit as the Personnel Committee. And if I understand correctly, during this hearing, we are considered a commission as opposed to just a committee. We will, our role and purpose is to determine, basically, we listen to what evidence is presented. We don't follow the rules of evidence like a court does, but we will hear from both sides. We don't do cross-examinations and all that kind of stuff, but if there are questions from either party or whatever, those of course can be asked. Also, this is an open and public hearing, but our deliberations will be closed, and that's all part of the procedures. I believe we have 10 days after the hearing to provide information as to what our decision process is, and we will do that. This hearing is being taped word for word so that if either party asks for a transcript, it can be accomplished, and it's my understanding that the person requesting the transcript is responsible for payment of that transcript. So if there's nothing further, did I leave anything out that I need to include?
Commissioner, perhaps, or Representative, perhaps what we ought to do is have the parties and their representatives introduce themselves on the record, and then I believe that there's a procedural issue that the Employees Council will raise to start the proceedings.
Okay.
So,
all right, Wynette, would you start, please?
Wynette DeGroot, Human Resource Director for Carroll County.
Deborah Newland, Human Resources Generalist, Carroll County.
John Khaled, Legal Counsel to Diane Gaynor.
Diane Gaynor, RN.
and for the record, I'm Tom Clausen, and I'll be acting as legal counsel for the Personnel Committee. And I understand that Attorney Khaled has a procedural issue that he'd like to address to the committee before we begin.
Yes.
As at the beginning.
Okay.
Correct. I don't know how much of the record from the proceeding before the county commissioners that you have, but at the previous plenary hearing before the county commissioners, we raised, as you know, this is a proceeding under RSA 28A:10:A, which deals with the state law provisions that govern how county employees can be disciplined, whether it be suspension or termination. There is a very innocuous statute that follows 28:10A, and that is 28:10B. We raised this at the previous hearing, and the commissioners indicated that this is a mandate that doesn't apply to them. It applies to this body when the matter gets to this point before the Personnel Committee. And if you look at RSA 2810B, it is entitled Jurisdiction, and it refers to the County Personnel Committee by name. And it provides that the jurisdiction of the County Personnel Committee to conduct discharge, removal, or suspension hearings shall be limited to those cases not involving the death of a county employee or any person under the care or custody of a county employee. It goes on in the next sentence to say, whenever the County Personnel Committee finds that a case involves a death of a county employee or any person under the care or custody of a county employee, the committee shall immediately transfer the case to the Superior Court. It goes on to say any determination made by the County Personnel Committee that a case involves the death of a county employee or any person under the care or custody of a county employee shall be inadmissible as evidence in any civil action arising from such death against the county or any county official or employee. My reading of this statute is that it is a mandatory statute. Like some statutes that we have in the New Hampshire Code, it is not the most complete or detailed or directive statute. But it is clear on its face that in cases that come before this body that, quote, involve the death of a county employee or any person under the care or custody of a county employee, the committee shall, and as you are all state reps, you know the meaning of the word shall. It's mandatory. Shall immediately transfer the case to the Superior Court. My client asked that this personnel committee take that action. First off, because it is mandatory state law. Second off, as the chairman indicated at the beginning of this introduction, that under your rules, it is an abbreviated form of due process. No cross-examination is permitted. The rules of evidence are not observed. After practicing 32 years, I've learned that having rules of procedure and rules of evidence is a good thing for litigating legal disputes. And this matter, although it may have seemed that it started out as an innocuous personnel dispute, is plainly a legal action now. And I think the Superior Court is a better forum, better suited to deal with this and to provide all the parties and participants to a more complete form of due process. So for that reason, I ask that this committee transfer the case to the Superior Court. And in discussion with Attorney Clausen before we went on the record, we seem to agree that what would likely take place at that point is the Superior Court would docket the action and process it in the ordinary course of its docket.
The discussion that I had with Attorney Khaled was simply if you decided that that would happen, what the Superior Court would do with it. I didn't commit you to a decision one way or the other on that issue. One other point I wanted to ask Attorney Khaled before we get the county's response, for the benefit of the committee, the purpose of this hearing is to provide the due process or part of the due process that the employee is entitled to in connection with the termination. And is my understanding correct, Attorney Khaled, that in making the request to refer this matter to the Superior Court, your client is not going to then raise the issue of a failure in due process if that occurs?
Yeah, the purpose of this request is to make an election, which we believe is mandatory under 2810B. If this personnel committee elects to follow the terms of the statute and transfer this to the Superior Court, we're not going to later complain that, gee whiz, you guys didn't give us a plenary hearing and you should have done that. That is an election being made by my client.
Okay.
And if the county has a response to that argument or has a position they'd like the committee to consider.
If that is the determination of Attorney Khaled and that they will not hold this against the process, then in light of not going forward and just letting it be heard, I would assume the commissioners would be in favor of that also.
Any other questions on behalf of the committee, or?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a question. At least myself, I'm not real familiar with the history of this case, okay? And so when we talk about a death of a person under care or custody of a county employee, I guess I need a little bit of understanding as to what occurred, if I could get some sort of explanation.
Yeah,
in
sure.
regards to that.
I think, you know, the simplest thing, the simplest place that I can refer you to for a description of what took place is the very first corrective action description that the Mountain Valley community.
Just a moment.
Do we, is that a document that we have?
We don't, I don't have that.
And that's in all of their
Okay.
records.
I don't know how those documents are arranged, Tom, but we had previously marked it as Exhibit A1.
Maybe we can get a couple copies of that that we can look on.
Where it is in here. The timeline wouldn't be.
Attorney Khaled, I believe you're referencing the corrective action plan that was issued on July 29th, is that correct?
That is correct.
All of the documents are in chronological order, and it was issued July 29th.
In this packet?
Yep.
Thank you.
And I would say for the record, because I know that there might be some HIPAA-related concerns, so let's refrain from referring to any patient by name, and any documents that we provide will redact the name of the individual.
Okay. Yes, would you continue, please?
Sure.
Sorry.
On the very first page of the July 29, 2014 corrective action plan issued by the MVC to Diane Gaynor, under the reason for corrective action, it is described leaving assigned floor during 11 to 7 without inform LNA staff of where you were, which led to a series of events creating a resident family complaint regarding the care of their mother, who was on hospice and actively dying. That is the employer's first description of the deviations that my client allegedly committed. And those are the allegations that brought this into play. Now, of course, as you know, there's been at least one informal or non-public hearing, and 2 public hearings. I believe 2 public hearings. At least there were 2 hearings before the county commissioners. And so further development of those allegations was made during that process. But that's the heart of the original complaint. And I might add, of course, my client disputes all of the material parts of that.
If I could, uh-huh.
I'm sorry, if I might just say one
Sure.
thing, please. The corrective action plan that Mr. Khaled is referring to was actually a result of his, it was a disciplinary piece that was put in place, not for the issue that brought us here today, but rather for leaving the assigned floor during the 11-7 staff without informing LNA of where she was, which led to a series of events. That was the purpose of the corrective action plan in question by Mr. Khaled. What brought us here today was the termination of the employee in question for a finding of neglect against a resident.
So if I might, in July, okay, this corrective action counseling took place.
Correct.
Okay. And it goes on where the employee has responded, or at least said something after the counseling session, which I assume was done appropriately. And the supervisor initially put her on unpaid administrative suspension, not to exceed 10 days. Is that
Correct.
That's correct, for having left the floor without notifying her staff, not being available for an emergency.
okay?
If you'll turn to page 2, number 6, it specifically states, pending any outcome of the Board of Nursing or the Department of Health and Human Services relevant to complaints filed in relation to this episode, disciplinary action could be continued up to and including termination of employment. That in fact did take place, and it was in fact that termination that brought us here today.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I ask Attorney Clausen a question?
Certainly.
Relative to 2810B, under what circumstances related to the death of an employee or someone under the care does this impact this committee? Does it have to be directly related to the cause? Does it have to be, is negligence a reason to bring this piece under consideration? How do we define our scope of oversight?
I think you've jumped ahead to the questions that we're going to be talking about in our deliberations on this issue. I will tell you that having been advised that this was going to be an issue, I took a look to see if I could find any case law that interpreted the language, and there do not appear to be any cases in New Hampshire that talk about what this language means. The choice of the word involves a death is a broad choice of language. In context, it seems to me that the statute is designed to address those situations in which the death, or the allegation is that the discipline is related to causing the death, but the statute doesn't say that, and it's it's unfortunately vague as to whether it ties it to cause, or whether it simply means involves.
Thank you.
Do you have anything further you'd like to add?
Only to the comment that Tom just addressed, and what Representative Butler just asked about. The rules of construction in New Hampshire of statutes is the Supreme Court always says that the legislature chose the words it intended to choose for a reason, and that in interpreting the statutes we're not to place meaning that the legislature did not place in the terms of the statute, and that words should be interpreted according to the plain and ordinary meaning of the words used. Given those guidelines, I think the choice of involved was made consciously to encompass any time there is personnel action that involves the death of a county employee or a person under the care of the county employee, because anything involving something of that level of magnitude, the legislature deemed it appropriate to have it be a plenary hearing in a court of general jurisdiction, which is why it used the word shall transfer to the Supreme or Superior Court.
I have one further question, and that is, Ms. Newland had read number 6 on page 2, and I was wondering if any outcome had occurred.
There has been an outcome of the Department of Health and Human Services investigation in which they made adverse findings against MVC. They made no adverse findings against my client personally, and the Board of Nursing has made no adverse findings against my client.
But the Board of Nursing, there's an ongoing, and DHHS actually asked for specifically for the file of Ms. Gaynor, and it refers to in the DHHS report, which is in all of your information. It does refer to some very specific actions.
So, do we get that now?
If you have questions about it, you can. If it relates to the jurisdictional question, then you should probably get that now. But I think you ought to focus on the jurisdictional question first.
Okay. Anybody have anything else in this regard?
Do you have any further?
Okay. In that case, I think it's necessary that we ask the people here to leave so that we can discuss this jurisdictional issue. And when we are done, we'll let you know what the result is. So you'll turn off the tape, be fine. And if you'll excuse us.
Maybe we ought to leave.
Okay, would it be easier for us to leave?
Why don't we leave?
Okay, we'll leave. Doesn't matter. Okay.
Tape that on?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We, as the Personnel Committee, recognize that you have raised an extremely important question. And we have requested that our attorney go back and look at the legislative history associated with the passing of this law. So,
what I've been instructed to do is to try to figure out what, if anything, the legislature said about this issue. There seems to be a distinction between there needing to be some kind of causal connection between the death and the disciplinary action, or is it simply any disciplinary action that in any way involves the death of a resident or an employee? Because of the threshold nature of that inquiry in determining whether the committee should proceed, I'm going to go back, do the research, advise the committee, and the committee's going to issue a decision on the jurisdictional issue first. If the committee decides that it has jurisdiction, we will reschedule the hearing in connection with that decision. Obviously, if the committee decides that it doesn't have jurisdiction, then we'll refer it to the committee will refer it to the Superior Court as appropriate. And I expect that the decision on that issue should be available next week at the latest. And since you raised this issue, Attorney Khaled, I want to get on the record that you're okay with us taking the time necessary to resolve the issue.
Yes.
And that because you're entitled to a timely hearing, and obviously we're going to delay the process a little bit in order to answer this question.
Well, because the course that you're taking is consistent with the direction that my client wants to go, we have no objection to your taking that time.
Okay. So that will be the plan. We will, I'll conduct the research that's necessary. I will advise the committee, and then the committee will issue a decision on the jurisdictional issue.
Okay. The hearing is closed for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's
May I have
take
those-
them back and
Yes,
put them
may I
all
have
back.
those pieces back?
Yes, you may. What is